He thought she was only a cook, until the cowboy realized she was his life's true love. The sun was low in the sky when Ethan Carter rode into the small prairie town. Dust followed behind his horse, rising softly with every step. He had been traveling for a long time, moving from place to place, never staying anywhere for too long. His hat was worn, his boots were tired, and his heart felt even heavier than both. Ethan was known as a hard-working cowboy, but also as a man who didn't like to stay still. He believed the open road was his only home. Still, something about this town felt different. Maybe it was the quiet streets, or the golden fields that stretched far into the distance. Or maybe it was just that he was finally tired of running. At the edge of the town stood a large ranch. It belonged to Mr. Howard, an old rancher who needed help managing his land. When Ethan heard about the job, he decided to give it a try. He told himself it would only be for a short time, just enough to earn some money and then move on again. Mr. Howard welcomed him kindly. "You look like a man who knows horses," he said with a small smile. Ethan nodded. "I do my best." And just like that, Ethan found himself staying at the ranch. The first few days were filled with work, fixing fences, feeding cattle, and riding across wide fields. Ethan liked the routine. It kept his mind busy and his thoughts quiet. But there was one place on the ranch he didn't pay much attention to: the kitchen. That was where Clara worked. Clara was the ranch's cook. She woke up before everyone else and prepared meals for the workers. She was quiet, simple, and always focused on her tasks. Her dresses were plain, and her hair was usually tied back neatly. Most people didn't notice her much, and Ethan was no different. To him, she was just the cook. Every morning, Ethan would walk into the kitchen, grab his breakfast, give a short nod, and leave without saying much. Clara would always greet him politely, but he rarely replied with more than a few words. "Good morning," she would say softly. "Morning," Ethan would answer, already turning away. But Clara noticed him. She noticed how he avoided eye contact. She noticed how he sat alone during meals. She noticed how his shoulders seemed heavy, like he was carrying something no one else could see. Clara was used to observing people. Living on the ranch had taught her that everyone had a story, even if they didn't speak about it. One evening, after a long day of work, Ethan returned to the ranch feeling more tired than usual. The sky was turning orange, and a gentle breeze moved through the fields. He walked into the kitchen, expecting the usual silence. But this time, something felt different. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. A warm light glowed from the small lamp on the table. Clara was there, placing food carefully onto a plate. "You're late today," she said gently, without looking up. Ethan paused for a moment. "Had more work than usual." Clara nodded. "Sit down, the food is still warm." Ethan hesitated, then slowly sat at the table. He took a bite of the meal, and for a moment, everything felt calm. It wasn't just the food, it was the quiet, peaceful feeling in the room. "You cook well," he said, almost without thinking. Clara looked at him, slightly surprised. "Thank you." That was the first real sentence he had spoken to her. After that night, something small began to change. Ethan still didn't talk much, but he started staying in the kitchen a little longer. Sometimes he would sit in silence while eating. Sometimes he would watch Clara as she worked. He didn't understand why, but being there made him feel at ease. Clara, on the other hand, didn't push him to talk. She understood that some people needed time. Instead, she simply continued her work, offering quiet kindness without expecting anything in return. Days passed, and the routine continued. But Ethan began to notice things he hadn't seen before. He noticed how Clara always made sure everyone had enough to eat. He noticed how she remembered what each worker liked. He noticed how her presence made the ranch feel complete. One afternoon, as Ethan was fixing a fence, he found himself thinking about the kitchen, about the warm meals, about Clara's calm voice. It confused him. He had been to many places, met many people, but he had never felt this kind of quiet comfort before. That evening, he returned to the kitchen again. Clara greeted him with the same soft smile. "Long day?" she asked. Ethan nodded. Then, after a short pause, he said something unexpected. "It feels peaceful here." Clara looked at him, her expression gentle. "Sometimes peace is found in simple places." Ethan didn't reply, but her words stayed in his mind. For the first time in a long while, Ethan Carter didn't feel like leaving right away. And though he didn't realize it yet, the place he thought was just a stop on his journey was slowly beginning to feel like something more. The days at the ranch began to pass in a steady rhythm. The sun would rise over the wide fields, and the workers would start their tasks. Ethan followed the same routine every day, but something inside him had quietly changed. Before, he only worked and kept to himself. Now, without fully understanding why, he found himself looking forward to one simple moment: going to the kitchen. Clara was always there, just as before, calm, quiet, and focused. But now, Ethan started to notice more about her. The way she moved carefully while cooking, the way she listened when others spoke, the way her presence made the room feel warm and safe. One morning, Ethan walked into the kitchen earlier than usual. Clara looked up, slightly surprised. "You're early today," she said. "Couldn't sleep much," Ethan replied, sitting down. Clara poured him a cup of coffee. "Sometimes the mind doesn't rest easily." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "You always speak like that, like you understand things." Clara gave a small smile. "I just listen. People say a lot without speaking." Ethan didn't fully understand her words, but they stayed with him. As the days went by, their conversations slowly grew longer. At first, they talked about simple things: the weather, the crops, the animals. But then, little by little, the talks became deeper. One evening, as the sky turned soft pink, Ethan sat at the kitchen table while Clara prepared dinner. "Have you always lived here?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes. This ranch has been my home for many years." "You never wanted to leave?" Ethan asked, curious. Clara paused for a moment. "I thought about it once, but then I realized. Sometimes staying can be just as meaningful as leaving." Ethan leaned back slightly. "I've always believed the opposite." Clara turned to look at him. "And has it made you happy?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about the long roads, the empty nights, and the many places he had been. He had always told himself that freedom was enough. But now, sitting in that quiet kitchen, he wasn't so sure anymore. "I don't know," he finally said. Clara didn't push him further. She simply returned to her work. Over time, Ethan also began to notice how important Clara was to everyone on the ranch. When one of the workers felt tired, she would prepare something special for him. When someone seemed worried, she would sit quietly and listen. She didn't speak loudly or demand attention, but somehow, everyone trusted her. Even Mr. Howard often came to the kitchen just to talk to her. One afternoon, Ethan saw something that surprised him. A young worker had made a mistake and felt upset about it. Instead of getting angry, Clara gently spoke to him, helping him understand and encouraging him to try again. Her words were simple, but they had a strong effect. Ethan watched from a distance, thinking. "She's not just a cook," he said quietly to himself. That thought stayed with him. Later that evening, Ethan sat in the kitchen again. The lamp gave a soft light, and the room felt peaceful. "You do a lot more than just cook," Ethan said suddenly. Clara looked at him, slightly confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, people listen to you. They trust you," Ethan said. "You help them." Clara smiled gently. "Everyone needs a little kindness. I just try to give what I can." Ethan nodded slowly. He was beginning to see her in a different way. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself changing in small ways. He started talking more with others. He stayed longer during meals. He even laughed once or twice. something he hadn't done in a long time. But the biggest change was inside him. He no longer felt the same urge to leave quickly. The idea of the open road didn't feel as exciting as before. Instead, he started to wonder what it would be like to stay. One afternoon, while riding across the fields, Ethan stopped and looked around. The land stretched wide and beautiful under the sun. The wind moved softly through the grass. For the first time, he didn't feel like a stranger there. That evening, he returned to the kitchen once again. Clara was placing fresh bread on the table. "You seem different these days," she said. Ethan sat down and thought for a moment. "Maybe I am." Clara looked at him with quiet curiosity. "In what way?" Ethan gave a small smile. "I don't feel like running anymore. At least, not as much." Clara didn't say anything right away. Then she nodded softly. "Sometimes, when you find the right place, your heart begins to rest." Ethan looked at her, and for a moment, everything became very clear. It wasn't just the ranch, it wasn't just the work, it was the feeling he had when he was around her. A feeling of calm, of belonging, of something he had never known before. But Ethan didn't fully understand it yet. All he knew was that Clara was no longer just the cook in his eyes. She was someone important, someone who made him see life differently. And without realizing it, Ethan Carter was slowly becoming a man who was no longer searching for a place, but beginning to care about a person. The ranch had become a place of quiet comfort for Ethan, even though he never said it out loud. His days were steady, his nights were peaceful, and the restless feeling inside him had slowly begun to fade. But life has a way of testing even the calmest moments. One morning, a group of travelers arrived near the ranch. They were heading west, talking about new lands, new chances, and wide open opportunities. Their stories were full of excitement, of places Ethan had never seen before. As Ethan listened, something old inside him stirred again. The road, the freedom, the life he had always known. One of the travelers, a friendly man named Cole, noticed Ethan's interest. "You look like a man who belongs out there," Cole said, pointing toward the distant horizon. "We leave in 2 days. You can ride with us." Ethan didn't answer right away, but the words stayed in his mind. That night, he sat outside, looking at the sky. The stars were bright, just like the many nights he had spent alone on the road. For years, this had been his life. Moving forward, never staying too long, never getting attached. He told himself this was who he was. But something felt different now. The next day, Ethan worked as usual, but his thoughts were not on the ranch. They kept drifting back to the travelers, to the idea of leaving again. Clara noticed it. When Ethan walked into the kitchen that evening, he seemed quiet in a different way. Not calm, but distant. "You seem far away today," Clara said gently. Ethan sat down slowly. Some travelers came by. "They're heading west." Clara nodded, waiting. "They asked me to join them," he continued. There was a short silence. "That sounds like something you would do," Clara said softly. Ethan looked at her, trying to read her expression. "Yes, it is." Clara gave a small smile, but her eyes were thoughtful. "Then you should do what feels right to you." Her voice was calm, but something in it felt different. Ethan expected her to say more, maybe to ask him to stay, but she didn't. She simply turned back to her work. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the ranch and about Clara. He remembered their quiet talks, the peaceful feeling in the kitchen, the way everything felt steady when he was near her. But then he thought about the road again. "It's who I am," he whispered to himself. The next morning, Ethan made his decision. He would leave. He packed his few belongings and prepared his horse. The ranch looked the same as always, but it felt different now, like something important was being left behind. Before leaving, he walked to the kitchen one last time. Clara was there, just as always. "I'm heading out," Ethan said. Clara looked at him and nodded. "I see." "I'll be riding with the travelers," he added. Clara placed a small bundle on the table. "Food for the journey." Ethan looked at it, then at her. "Thank you." There was a pause. Neither of them said much. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Clara said softly. Ethan nodded. "I hope so too." And then, without saying anything more, he turned and left. The road welcomed him again. At first, everything felt familiar. The sound of hooves on the ground, the open sky, the endless path ahead. The travelers were friendly, their stories lively. But as the days passed, something began to feel wrong. The excitement faded quickly. The nights felt longer. The silence felt heavier. Ethan would sit by the fire, listening to others talk, but his mind was somewhere else. Back at the ranch, back in the kitchen, back with Clara. He began to notice how empty everything felt without those simple moments he once didn't value. The warm meals, the quiet conversations, the feeling of being understood without saying much. One evening, as the group rested near a river, Ethan sat alone, staring at the water. Cole walked over. "You're quieter than before." Ethan gave a small nod. "Something on your mind?" Cole asked. Ethan took a deep breath. "I thought this is what I wanted." "And now?" Cole said. Ethan looked down at the ground. "Now it doesn't feel the same." Cole smiled slightly. "Sometimes we think we belong to the road until we find something worth staying for." Ethan didn't reply, but those words struck deeply. That night, he couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't the road he missed. It wasn't the freedom. It was Clara. The way she spoke, the way she listened, the way she made him feel like he didn't have to keep running. Ethan finally understood. She was never just the cook. She was the reason the ranch felt like home. She was the reason he had started to change. And now, without her, everything felt empty again. The next morning, before the group could leave, Ethan made his choice. "I'm heading back," he said. Cole nodded, as if he already knew. "Then don't waste time." Ethan mounted his horse and turned around. This time, the road didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a path leading him back to something real, back to the ranch, back to the place where his heart had quietly found peace, back to Clara. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Carter wasn't running away from something. He was riding toward it. The journey back felt different for Ethan. This time, the road was not long and empty. It felt full of purpose. Every step his horse took brought him closer to something he finally understood. The wind still moved across the land. The sky was still wide, but Ethan no longer felt lost inside it. He had one clear thought in his mind: Clara. He rode for hours without stopping much. His heart felt restless, but not in the old way. It wasn't about running anymore. It was about reaching. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was beginning to set. The fields glowed golden, just like the first day he had arrived. But now, everything looked more meaningful. Ethan slowed his horse as he entered the ranch. The place was calm, just as he remembered. A few workers waved at him, surprised but happy to see him back. "You're back already?" one of them called out. Ethan gave a small smile. "Yeah, I am." But he didn't stop to talk. He went straight to the kitchen. The door was slightly open. Warm lights spilled outside, and the familiar smell of fresh food filled the air. Ethan paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then he stepped inside. Clara was there. She stood near the table, arranging plates just like always. For a second, it felt like nothing had changed, like he had never left at all. But then she turned and saw him. She froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You came back," Clara said softly. Ethan nodded. "I did." There was something different in his voice now, something steady and sure. Clara looked at him carefully. "I thought you would be far away by now." "I thought so too," Ethan replied. He stepped closer, removing his hat slowly. He wasn't the same man who had left. The confusion in his eyes was gone. In its place was clarity. "I didn't get very far," he continued. "Not really." Clara stayed quiet, waiting. Ethan took a breath. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to say what he felt. "I thought the road was everything," he said. "I thought moving forward was the only way to live." He looked around the kitchen, then back at her. "But out there, it didn't feel right anymore." Clara's expression softened slightly. "What changed?" Ethan looked directly at her. "You," he said. The word hung gently in the air. Clara blinked, surprised. "I didn't understand it before," Ethan continued. "I thought you were just part of the ranch, just the cook." He shook his head lightly. "But I was wrong." He stepped a little closer. "You're the reason this place feels like home," he said. "You're the reason I stopped wanting to run." Clara's eyes filled with quiet emotion, but she didn't interrupt. Ethan's voice softened. "When I left, everything felt empty. The road didn't mean anything anymore. I kept thinking about this place, about the kitchen." He paused. "About you." Clara looked down for a moment, taking in his words. "I didn't stop you from leaving," she said gently. "I know," Ethan replied, "and I'm glad you didn't. I needed to understand it myself." There was a short silence. "I almost made the biggest mistake of my life," he added quietly. Clara looked up at him again. "And now?" Ethan smiled, not the small, unsure smile he used to have, but a real one. "Now I know what matters," he said. He placed his hat on the table. "I don't want to keep running," he continued. "I want to stay. I want to build something real. Here." Clara's voice was soft. "Staying isn't always easy." "I know," Ethan said. "But for the first time, I don't want easy. I want something true." He took a step closer. "And I want it with you." The room felt quiet and warm at the same time. Clara looked at him, searching his face. She could see the honesty in his eyes. The same man was standing there, but something inside him had truly changed. "You're sure?" she asked. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I've never been more sure of anything." Clara smiled, a soft, genuine smile that held both warmth and hope. "You've changed," she said. Ethan gave a small laugh. "I think I finally stopped running." For a moment, they simply stood there, understanding each other without needing many words. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared, and the sky turned deep blue. The ranch was calm, peaceful, just as it had always been. But for Ethan, everything was different now. He didn't see the ranch as a temporary stop anymore. He saw it as a beginning. And Clara was no longer just the cook in his story. She was the reason his story had changed. That night, Ethan stayed in the kitchen longer than ever before, not as a traveler passing through, but as someone who had finally found where he belonged. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the next place to go. He was thinking about the life he wanted to build, right there, with her. And as the quiet night settled over the ranch, Ethan Carter knew one simple truth. He had been searching for freedom all his life. But what he truly needed was love.